Are you thinking about starting or nourishing a career in menstrual cycle health? Then consider joining our 9-month online holistic hormone and cycle coaching certification training. In this training, you get science-backed and evidence-based education, as well as teachings about the somatic aspects of having a menstrual cycle, functional nutrition, hormone testing, and much, much more. We will have incredible live group sessions, and you will get guidance from me. There will also be amazing guest teaching lectures from experts in the field, and at the end you will receive an official certificate of completion that is globally recognized. As a listener of the Planting Seeds podcast, you receive an additional €100 off when you use the code PODCAST when you sign up. Click on the link in the show notes to learn more.
Hello friends, my name is Iris Josephina. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Planting Seeds podcast. On the Planting Seeds podcast, we explore how we can cultivate a more gentle relationship with our cyclical bodies, the earth, each other, and the world around us through using our senses, science, the subtle, and the secret. On Planting Seeds, we talk about all those topics you've always wanted to talk about. We are shamelessly opening up the conversations that we all so desperately need to settle in our precious bodies and relate to each other in a more open, truthful, and empowered way. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Planting Seeds podcast. Today we are going to be talking about Menarche, or our first period. And I was on a walk the other day and I was just reflecting on my own journey and how I have experienced Menarche, my first period. And I just wanted to take a moment to record a podcast about this because we don't talk about this so much, and I feel that the journey of Menarche is highly undervalued, and the recognition for this journey is highly undervalued. So with this episode, I want to bring Menarche back into the light and allow it to have its rightful place in our cyclical continuum. So I want to start with my own journey of Menarche. Before I start, I want to say that, talking about this and reflecting on it may bring up some emotion, and that's okay. And at the end of this episode, I'm going to give you some tips and tools to support yourself through this journey, especially if you haven't had the Menarche that you maybe have wished for. So let's start with my own journey. I still remember the date. I still remember the year. I still remember what kind of underwear I was wearing. So it was the 27th of September, 2001. And my mother and I had been shopping. And when we got home, I really had to go to the bathroom. I really had to pee. And when I went to the bathroom, I pulled my knickers down and I saw this brown spot in my underwear. And I still remember up until today, I was wearing my favorite undies. They were lavender, lilac colored. And my first response was shock. Because at first I thought I had pooped my pants. I was like, hold up, what? Did I just poop my pants? But I couldn't recall having to poo. So then, a split second later, I thought, is this my period? And mind, I was 11 years old at the time. And I didn't really share about my body so much with my mother, but I felt in this moment that I really had to share this with her. So I called my mom to the bathroom and I told her I thought my period had started. She came in and asked me whether she could have a look, and I showed her the brown spot in my lilac panties, and this is really core memory unlocked. Even though my mom and I had a bit of a wonky relationship, in this moment, it felt extremely comforting to have her there and to have her behave normally and confirming that, yes, I probably had started my period and I had become a true big girl, as they would say in my family. And I remember thinking, a true big girl, what does that mean? What would change, you know? My mom gave me clean undies and pads and showed them how to put them in my panties. And at the time, I was like, these pads. I had used these pads as diapers on my dolls. And I had never understood how to truly use them because the sticky part always went on the dolls. And now I understood that I had been using them wrong all throughout my childhood. And the secret of how to use these pads the correct way was finally revealed to me. And I remember feeling apprehensive and in doubt about telling my dad that I had started my period. And up until today, I actually have no idea why I felt this way. I loved my dad. Bless his soul. He passed away when I was 19. I trusted him, but I did not want to tell him that I started bleeding from my vagina. And maybe this was a boundary created by my physiologic blueprint, like a protection mechanism that a daughter ought not to tell their father when they become a woman. I don't know. But my mom did tell my dad, and his reaction was a little reserved, but also warm and comforting. And at the time, I could not receive that reaction because somehow I was overcome by waves upon waves of shame. I felt really strange. I felt really alienated from myself. And looking back at it, I felt sorry I could not, receive his support and his supportive response. And at the time, even though I was just, 11 years old, something had changed inside of me. I was not sure what it was, but I definitely felt different. I felt as if I had unlocked some sort of secret of life. And simultaneously, I felt really extremely lonely because none of my friends had started their periods. I was the first one. And I was really afraid that they would judge me for it and that they would not understand. And side note, they did not, which made me feel even more lonely. And the Monday after, my first period came on a Saturday. The Monday after, I told my best friend that I had started my period. And she was excited for me, as she did not have hers yet. And the low feeling in my womb that I had had on the Saturday when my first period had begun had now made place for an all-encompassing, heavy feeling that spread over my entire 11-year-old pelvis. The tiredness of carrying this painful feeling even spread to my little legs. The feeling of this being some sort of cool secret of life quickly subsided for feelings of what on earth is this nightmare? Why do I have to experience this? Why me? And the nightmare became even worse. Later that day, and I did not understand how my mother could have sent me to school on my first period. I was armed with a pack of pads, and I was sent off. And oh my gosh, there was blood. So much blood. I did not understand where it all came from, and I worried that maybe I was dying. Was this normal? Initially, I was quite excited about my period, but that feeling had completely vanished. And that day, that Monday, it was our annual school run. I loved running. I was really good at running too. I was in athletics class twice a week, and running was one of my favorite things to do. I was fast, and running made me feel so free. But that day, gosh, I felt so terrible. I wanted to perform. I wanted to show everyone how running came natural to me and that I could win that race, like I usually would. But I was bleeding so heavily that a maxi pad, the size that my mom also wore, was full of blood so quickly. I went to the bathroom and saw that I had blood through the pad and that some blood was on my underwear as well. And I remember my eyes just filling up with tears. It felt like so much to handle. How could I be 11 years old and I had to handle this? What did I sign up for? How could I have wished for my period to come? How could anybody celebrate this? And there were so many questions, did all people with periods go through this? Did it feel like this for everybody? And why did I feel so fucking weak and so dizzy? So many thoughts just raced through my head. And I was so self-conscious that if I stayed too long in the toilet stall, people would probably get suspicious. Maybe they would know I was bleeding. And somehow I felt that this wasn't something I could openly share. And it became worse. My friends kept banging on the door and laughing and asking what took me so long. They asked me how big my poop must be for staying in the toilet stall for so long. And all I could do was cry. Tears ran over my cheeks. Nobody taught me how to do this. Nobody had told me how to manage this. I tried to wipe some of the blood off of my underwear with toilet paper and put a new pad in. And I kept wondering, why did nobody tell me it would be like this? Why did it feel as if my entire life was ruined forever? And how was I supposed to run like this? The tears just kept falling from my eyes. I wanted to run. Why did this happen now? Why did this happen on one of the most important days of the whole school year? I wiped the blood and I wiped my eyes. I was wiping 2 places on my body, and both sides did not stop. And oh, I didn't tell you this. My pad did not have wings. So I was afraid it would move in my pants. And it also didn't stick properly because the sides of my underwear were wet with blood. How would this stick? Especially while running. Somehow my little brain went over all these thoughts, and somehow up until today I remember them. I remember pulling up my underwear so high to prevent the pad from moving during running. I gathered my courage, I wiped my tears, and I wanted to run so badly. But then I also felt dizzy and nauseous, and my legs were so extremely heavy. Why? It was as if a body of water was running down my legs constantly. A heavy, throbbing feeling, starting at my hips, running down the back and side of my legs. When I got out of the bathroom stall, my friends just laughed at me and they said, "How many poops did you have?" I was embarrassed to say that that wasn't what I was doing. And as we walked to the field where we were supposed to run, there was only one thing I could think about. I kept repeating it to myself in my head like a storm. Do not sit down. I could feel that the blood on my panties wasn't dry yet, and I understood that if I would sit down, it would leak through my sports pants, which were white. Our school uniform sports pants were white. Who came up with that? I had so many questions. Why was the world the way it was? Why did people organize things the way they did that were not friendly for people with periods? I guess this was the first moment where I got a glimpse of patriarchy and the way society is chronically unfriendly in so many ways when it comes to folks who bleed. The younger classes were still running and we had to wait. My friends kept asking me why I did not sit down, and I told them I preferred standing, while in reality, I was really terrified to leak through and other people would know that I was on my period. I could not bring myself to share all of this with my friends because I was afraid that they would judge me or, even worse, reject me. Eventually, it was our turn to run. We warmed up a little bit, then got in position. A shot sounded, letting us know that we could start running. My entire body felt different. This was not how it usually felt. I was so tired. My legs were so heavy, and my womb started cramping, and all I wanted to do was cry. This was also the first time in my life that I hated running, and my little mind went into a battle with itself. How could it be that all of a sudden I hated running? I always loved running. I just wanted to stop running and lay in bed. My friends, who usually were slower than I was, started passing me by and calling me a slow turtle. I wanted to run fast so badly, but my little body said no. And after the run, oh my God, I felt so terrible. I ended with the last ones, and this never happened to me before. I was always one of the fastest ones. What had happened to me? I was convinced that this period stuff made me a bad runner. Nobody had told me that I would hate the things I loved the most as soon as my period started. There were so many things that I didn't know. This was my first period story. And it was not just my period that had started. Like so many things in my life felt to be ending. Nobody had told me that starting your period comes with a whole lot of endings too. I get emotional when I share this story because it's so real. Like this experience, it's a core memory. It's a core memory that sits in my body forever. And I want to use my story as an illustration of our culture. And with culture, I mean Dutch culture, but also just Western culture in general. And then from there, I want to zoom into the individual experience and how it imprints into our soul. How our first period imprints into our soul and what that means for our cyclical continuum. So the experience of menarche is really big. It's on the one hand an individual physical experience, but it's also a communal experience because your role in family, your role in society changes. And the way that young folks are rushed to grow up these days and rush through menarche is really unheard of. When I observe it right now and how it went for me and how no attention was given, it really breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart. And I want to speak a little bit about this rite of passage and what it actually means and what it means for us on an individual level. So how I see menarche, it's a moment of separation. It's a moment of separation from family. First, we are held, or I hope most of us are, held by a family structure. And the moment we move through that transition, this transition towards menarche and the changes that come after that, is really a separation from that family structure where we are growing into ourselves and growing into our own identity. It's really the entire process of becoming. And becoming takes time. Becoming is a process. But when I look at society, we are not given that time. We're not given the time it takes. It can take up to years for our periods to normalize. Years. But what happens in our society very often is when a person has their first period, they're provided with hormonal birth control immediately, not given any time, but rushing the process to quote unquote regulate the menstrual cycle, which by the way does not happen at all with hormonal birth control. You suppress all of your hormones. That aside, this process of becoming, this initiation, is taken away from so many of us. We're not given the time to experience the entire transition. When the bubble of innocence bursts with our first menarche, we are pushed. We are not held. We are not honored. We are not initiated. We are not allowed to observe our changing physiology as an initiation. And that hurts, man. That really hurts. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. We go from being held by our family to being birthed into the menstrual cycle, and then being taught that we can't talk about that cycle. We can't experience it too much. And the best way is to suppress it immediately. While the experience of having a menstrual cycle and the natural regulating of the cycle also helps us in our journey towards self-discovery. This is our natural blueprint of discovery, of coming of age. Coming of age doesn't happen overnight. It's a whole process. It takes years. And we don't know what is happening in that moment. There are so many changes that we can't keep up with realizing who we are. We feel that we are changing. We feel that we are going through such a big thing. And then at the same time, we are basically abandoned from the experience. And we are taught to abandon the experience, which actually means we are taught to abandon ourselves and our becoming. And this delicate time of coming of age is such a place of exposure, of unknowing. We are living life in this changing body, and the outside world, our environment, can witness these changes. We start to develop breasts, our voice may change, our skin may change, our hair may change. It's such an exposure, and it can be such an extremely lonely journey if we are not held by the grown-ups, if we are not navigated through this landscape of big change. And I feel that adults really have a job, have a task to see this change, to witness this change, to recognize this change, and recognize who we are becoming, who we are in the becoming, in the transition, in the rite of passage. And I truly feel that when we are not recognized, this is when we start acting out, where we have to prove to the adults that we are maturing, that we are growing up. And this is where the rebellion starts, the teenage rebellion. I remember it so clearly for myself. I was not fully witnessed in my journey. I was witnessed in, oh, there is blood coming out of your vagina. But I was not witnessed in the mental changes, the change of self-perception, the change of emotional relating and regulating, the changes in identity. I was not recognized in that, and I tried so hard to prove that I was becoming. I was loud. I was raging. And right now I can hold myself in so much compassion because I understand that this journey of becoming, this opportunity that the menstrual cycle gives us to help us to hold our hand in the becoming. Right now I can see the value in that. And what I can also see now is that how we start bleeding in menarche and how we are witnessed imprints our future menstrual experiences. Menarche is the journey of discovery and becoming. And in this transition, in these transitioning moments, we are so permeable. We are so much more affected by things, so much more sensitive. And when we are not held in that, when we are not witnessed and recognized, it can feel extremely lonely. It can feel so lonely. And how menarche is responded to by others, people that we value, our parents, our peers, our teachers, this is how we may be experiencing it. If we are not allowed to be our true selves, if we are not allowed to feel the entire spectrum of this rite of passage, of this transition, we may start to ignore these parts in ourselves. We may start to reject these parts in ourselves. And when we are shamed for this beautiful, powerful, intimate experience, we may constantly feel we're not worthy. We're not good enough. And we may constantly look out to others for who to be, because we aren't recognized in our true selves. And we aren't allowed to connect to ourselves. And these moments can be extremely hard. And mind you, in that moment, most of us are still a child. It is not because we have one drop of blood coming from our vagina that we all of a sudden are an adult that knows everything. No, we need to be held in that transition. We need to be supported in that transition. We need to be honored and affirmed that it is confusing, it is big. It comes with a goodbye because it is a moment where we are saying goodbye to our innocence as a child. And we are allowed to sit in that innocence for just a little bit longer and be recognized in it. And what I've seen is that a lot of children who start their periods all of a sudden start reaching out to their parents, to their, aunties, to somehow hold on to a remembering. Like, I've heard many stories of children wanting to be held like a baby, wanting to play the games that they played when they were children, not for no reason. They are aware that they have to say goodbye to that part of themselves, maybe subconsciously. We need to be there for them. It touches me so much when I think about my future daughter. I never want her to feel as lonely as I felt in my journey. And I am swearing to Goddess that I will do everything in my power to support her. Because this transition is really where our adult psyche is like falling into place. We are transforming into the person that we are going to be as an adult. It is huge. It is huge. Menarche is the big announcement of the becoming. And we deserve to be held. The menstrual cycle and the beginning of our menstrual cycle is an anointment. It's a starting point. And it's such a deep, intimate process. And I really feel that our society takes away that intimacy. We aren't allowed to be so intimate with ourselves. And I believe, and I haven't backed this up by science or anything, it's just something that feels so true to me. The reason why so many people with menstrual cycles, so many women feel so lost and feel that they have to look outside for validation is because they weren't able to take this anointment, this intimacy, this becoming seriously. They weren't supported in it. And I feel that is why so many of us are lost. And this is also why I feel that so many of us in every transition moment, every period is a transition moment. Conception, labor, birth, postpartum, perimenopause, the moment of menopause and postmenopause. This is why all of these transition moments are so hard for so many of us, because we haven't learned on how to be within the transition. We have been taught to push the transition away, to ignore the transition, to jump from one thing to another, or just, to find it extremely normal to just pop into one side of the cyclical continuum to another. It doesn't work that way. Our physiology doesn't work that way. Our psyche doesn't work that way. And I feel that is why there is such a big discrepancy between our experience and how we can share about our experience and how we embody our experience. This is huge. This is huge. And maybe you're listening to this and you're close to menopause, or you are in your 30s or your 40s, and you think, shit. I want to tell you that it's possible to rewrite the story of your first blood. It's possible to honor that moment in a ceremony, in a ritual, however it works for you. And I'm seriously thinking to organize this for people. I've done this before for people privately, but I feel it's something that we need as a collective. It's so powerful to reclaim the story of your first blood. It's powerful. And it gives so much meaning, and it gives so much direction. And I know because I've done it. I've held ceremonies, multiple ceremonies for my blood. And I tried to make every bleed a ceremony to make up for the ceremony that I didn't have when I came of age. And I want to invite you to do the same. This is important. Even when you already have stopped bleeding, you can reclaim the story of your first blood. You can do that. You're allowed to do that. You're worthy of that. Whew. This is a big topic. And I want to invite you, after you've listened to this episode, go sit down with yourself or go on a walk and let this all sink in, and then write about it. Write about your experience. Write about how you feel after this episode, and then write about your first blood. Write your story, write it down. And when you feel open, maybe you can share it with others, with your children, with your friends, with your mom, with your partner, whoever you want to share it with. But please know that you are worthy of recognition. You are worthy of your initiation. You really, truly are. Feel free to reach out to me to share how this episode landed for you. And I would love to hear about your ceremonies, your rituals. And I also would love to send you so much compassion, so much recognition, and so much love for your transition of menarche. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, with your friends, with your family, post about it on social media, or leave a rating or a review on all the platforms. To catch all the latest news from me, you can follow at the Planting Seeds podcast on Instagram or at Cycle Seeds on Instagram, or you can go to my website www.cycleseeds.com. Thank you again so much, and I'll see you next time.